He mocked her faded dress in front of a wealthy crowd. Seconds later, her music left the entire room speechless. And by night's end, she owned the concert hall he once ruled. The lights in the grand concert hall sparkled like stars, and the red carpet stretched out like a river of royalty. People in expensive suits and glamorous gowns moved around with glasses of champagne, laughing politely, posing for pictures, and showing off designer jewelry. The event was a charity gala, held once a year, and it always brought together the city's wealthiest people. Everything looked perfect. Everything looked rich. Inside the hall, waiters in crisp white shirts carried trays of food and drinks, and the guests gathered in small groups, talking about business, vacations, and new investments. Among them was Mr. Langford, one of the richest men in the city. He owned luxury hotels, restaurants, and even a few music companies. He was known not just for his wealth, but also for his sharp tongue. He loved to make jokes about people he thought were below his level. People laughed at his jokes, not because they were funny, but because they were afraid to disagree. Mr. Langford stood tall in his black tuxedo, a gold watch sparkling on his wrist. His hair was perfectly styled, and his shoes shined so brightly they looked new. He sipped his wine and looked around the room with pride. He believed he was better than everyone else. He always judged people by their clothes, their cars, and the way they walked. The music performances were about to start. One by one, young, talented musicians were going to play short pieces for the audience. It was part of the charity theme, raising money for young artists who needed support. A host walked up to the stage and welcomed everyone. "Tonight, you will hear amazing talent," he said, "and we have saved something special for the end." People clapped politely, not really paying attention. They were too busy checking their phones or looking at each other's outfits. Suddenly, the back doors of the hall opened, and a woman walked in. She looked out of place. Her dress was simple, light blue, but a bit faded, and her shoes were old. She carried a worn-out folder under her arm. Her hair was tied back loosely, and she wore no makeup or jewelry. Mr. Langford saw her and raised an eyebrow. "Who let thee help in here?" he said loudly. A few people laughed. "Did someone forget to mop the floor before the show?" he added, making the crowd around him chuckle again. The woman didn't say anything. She kept walking with quiet confidence and sat on one of the chairs in the corner. She looked calm, even though people were staring at her. Some whispered. Others pointed. Mr. Langford leaned toward his assistant and asked, "Is she part of the cleaning staff? Or did someone's aunt crash the party?" His assistant looked at the list and frowned. "Evelyn Moore. She's performing last tonight." "Performing," Mr. Langford said, now louder. "In that outfit." More guests turned their heads. It was clear they were all confused. They expected young, polished performers, not someone who looked like she had just come from a thrift store. Some guests even whispered if there had been a mistake. But Evelyn just sat silently, her eyes focused, her hands resting in her lap. Host returned to the stage to announce the first performer. A teenage violinist played a beautiful classical piece. Then came a guitarist, followed by a small choir. Each performance was met with polite applause, but the audience wasn't very emotional. They were more impressed by the performers' clothes and families than the actual music. Evelyn remained quiet during all of it, watching respectfully. Every time someone performed, she clapped sincerely. She wasn't bothered by the stares or the whispers. She seemed to carry something inside her. That protected her from judgment. Mr. Langford couldn't stop commenting. "Let's see if Cinderella over there can even find middle C," he laughed. By the time the final performance was about to begin, the audience was tired. Some looked at their watches. Others whispered about going home soon. But then the host walked up and said, "Now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Evelyn Moore, our final performer." There was a short silence. People looked around, unsure. Evelyn stood up slowly and walked to the stage. She didn't smile or wave, just moved toward the grand piano like it was something she had known forever. Mr. Langford leaned back in his chair. "Let's hope her fingers are better than her fashion sense," he whispered, sipping his drink. Evelyn sat down, adjusted the bench quietly, and opened her folder. She placed a few pages of music on the stand and looked at the piano. Keys. Then she took a deep breath. The first note she played was soft, almost like a whisper. It floated through the air, barely heard above the sound of someone setting down a glass. But then came the next note, and the next, and suddenly the room began to change. The music grew. It wasn't just sound, it was emotion. The notes felt. Like stories, like memories, like dreams. She wasn't just playing the piano, she was speaking through it. Her hands moved across the keys not just with skill, but with love, with heartbreak, with history. Every sound carried weight, like it had meaning beyond the music. The crowd slowly became quiet. The people who were bored, who were checking, their phones stopped. Heads turned. Conversations died. The waiters at the back paused with trays in their hands. Even Mr. Langford, who had been ready to joke again, froze. He looked at the woman on stage, the one he had mocked, and now he couldn't take his eyes off her hands. She played like someone who had lived 1,000 lives. The music wasn't loud or flashy. It was honest, raw, and beautiful.
Oh.
There was sadness in it, but also hope. There was struggle, but also strength. Some people in the audience felt tears forming in their eyes, even though they didn't know why. Langford's drink remained untouched on the table. He didn't blink. He didn't speak. He was lost in the sound. Evelyn's performance went on. For nearly 10 minutes, there were no lights flashing, no special effects, just her, the piano, and her story. As she reached the final part, the music built up, climbing higher and higher like it was reaching for something. Then it slowed, became gentle again, and ended on a soft, quiet note that hung in the air like a breath. For a moment, nobody moved. The silence was full, like the whole room had forgotten where they were. Then suddenly, someone stood up and clapped, then another, and another. In seconds, the whole hall rose to its feet. The applause was loud, real, and emotional. Evelyn stood slowly, nodded once, and walked off the stage, her eyes calm. She didn't bow deeply or smile big. She didn't soak in the praise. She just walked with quiet grace. Mr. Langford stood too. But he didn't clap right away. His face was serious. He looked down at the floor, then at the piano. He had judged her. He had made jokes. And now he realized he had been wrong, not just about her, but maybe about many things. He began to clap slowly, not because others were doing it, but because he meant it. The room was still full of noise. But Evelyn was gone, walking out into the night, her worn-out shoes clicking gently against the marble floor. And that was the night the billionaire with the sharp tongue saw something he couldn't buy. True talent wrapped in humility, dressed in a faded blue dress, and more powerful than all his money combined. The room still echoed with the applause, but Evelyn had already walked away from the stage. She didn't look back. She didn't wait to see who was clapping the loudest or who was standing up last. Her performance was never meant to impress people like Mr. Langford or the rich crowd dressed in diamonds and silk. She had played from her heart, and that was enough for her. But for everyone else in the room, something had changed, especially for Mr. Langford. He sat down slowly, still unsure of what he had just experienced. The sound of the piano still rang in his ears, as if the notes had left invisible fingerprints on his soul. For the first time in a long time, he was speechless. The man who always had something smart or sarcastic to say suddenly had no words. A waiter passed by, offering more champagne, but Langford waved him away. He wasn't interested in the drinks anymore. His eyes stayed on the empty piano bench. For a long time, it had just been an instrument to him, another expensive item, another tool used for entertainment. But tonight, it had become something else entirely. That woman, Evelyn Moore, had turned the piano into a voice that told a story so deep, so human, that even the richest people in the room couldn't ignore it. People around Langford whispered in amazement. "Who is she? I've never heard anything like that. Why haven't we heard her name before? I thought she was a cleaner." Langford heard them all. It embarrassed him. He had said the same thing, maybe worse. He had made jokes loud enough for Evelyn to hear, and yet she never reacted. She never glared or responded. She didn't let his words touch her. Instead, she let her music speak. Some guests tried to find her after the show. A few went backstage, thinking she might be there. Others looked near the exit, but she had already left, walking out into the night like a shadow, quiet and unnoticed. She had come to play, and that was all she came for. Outside, the air was cooler. Evelyn walked alone down the street, her folder tucked under her arm. She didn't need the cheers. She didn't need the praise. Music had always been her home, even when life took everything else away. Back inside, the host of the event tried to speak, but the crowd was too busy talking about Evelyn. The scheduled speeches, the final thank yous, the announcement about donations, all of it faded into the background. No one cared anymore. All they could talk about was the woman in the faded dress who played like her soul was on fire. Langford finally stood up. He didn't speak to anyone. He left the building without saying goodbye. His driver opened the door of the limousine, but Langford asked him to wait. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment thinking. He pulled out his phone and called his assistant. Find out everything about Evelyn Moore, he said. Sir, you heard me? Where she lives, what she's done, why we don't know her, everything. Yes, sir, right away. Langford got into the car and closed the door. As the vehicle pulled away from the curb, he stared out the window in silence. His mind, usually filled with business numbers, stocks, and deals, now played music. Her music that night in his luxury penthouse. Langford couldn't sleep. He poured himself a drink, sat by the fireplace, and opened his laptop. He typed her name into the search bar. Evelyn Moore. But not much came up. There were no recent interviews, no performances, no videos, no scandals. Just one article from years ago, feature in a small music magazine. The article showed a younger Evelyn, maybe in her early 20s. She had big eyes, a soft smile, and sat beside a piano. The headline read, Child Prodigy, Evelyn Moore shocks judges with her soulful playing. Langford read the article word by word. It said she had started playing piano at age 4, and by age 10, she was already composing music. People said her music made adults cry. She had won competitions and was expected to become one of the greatest classical pianists in the country. But then the article ended with a question mark. It mentioned she had suddenly disappeared after turning 21. No one knew where she went or why she stopped performing. Some thought she had moved abroad. Others thought she had given up music. Langford leaned back in his chair. Why would someone with such talent disappear? The next day his assistant called. Sir, I found some information, he said. Well? She lives in a small neighborhood outside the city. Works as a part-time music teacher at a public school. Doesn't own a car. Doesn't use social media. She seems very private. Why did she perform last night? Apparently the charity organizer is her old friend. He begged her to play. She said no at first, but agreed only to support the young musicians. Langford rubbed his chin. No sponsors? No manager? No label. None, sir. She's not interested in fame. Hung up the phone and sat quietly. It didn't make sense to him. Why would someone with such a gift choose a life of silence? He thought about himself. If he had talent like hers, he would use it to build an empire. He would perform for kings and presidents. He would become a legend. But Evelyn had walked off stage and vanished like it didn't matter. That's when it hit him. To her, it really didn't matter. She didn't play for fame. She played because it was in her blood, because it was the only way to express her soul. She didn't care if a billionaire laughed at her dress. She cared about the music. For Langford, this was a foreign concept. He had always used money to gain power and respect. But last night, he had seen power without wealth, respect without status, beauty without makeup, and it had shaken him. He called his assistant again. Find out where she teaches. I want to visit, sir. She works at a public school. You might attract attention. I don't care. Make it happen quietly. 2 days later, Langford stood at the back of a small music room in a school that smelled like old books and chalk. Evelyn was at the front, teaching a group of kids how to play simple melodies. She was patient, smiling warmly as she guided their fingers. Langford didn't speak. He just watched. When the class ended, he stepped forward. Evelyn noticed him, but didn't look surprised. "Thought I might see you," she said calmly. I wanted to say I was wrong," Langford said, clearing his throat. "About everything." She nodded but didn't thank him. She simply said, "You heard the music. That's enough." He didn't know what to say next. He had come prepared to offer her money, sponsorships, even a concert tour. But in that moment, standing in her quiet world, all his offers felt meaningless. "I want to help," he said. "I don't need help," she replied gently. "But there are kids here who do." Langford looked around the worn-down classroom. The chipped paint, the old piano, saw it now, just the talent, but the purpose behind it. "I'll start with that piano," he said. "It deserves to be replaced." Evelyn gave a small smile. "Only if the children get to use it more than I do." And that was how it started. Langford didn't realize it yet, but something inside him was changing. The man who once mocked her dress was beginning to understand her world. A world of feeling, of passion, of quiet strength. The billionaire had come to offer her the world. But what he found was a better one, hers. Evelyn's performance had stirred something deep in everyone, especially in Mr. Langford. He was a man used to getting whatever he wanted: deals, respect, attention, even fake admiration. But now, after hearing Evelyn play, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: humility. That single performance had reminded him that money couldn't buy everything, couldn't buy soul. It couldn't buy truth. After visiting her school and seeing how she taught children with so much love and patience, Langford became obsessed with learning more about her. Not because he wanted to control her or make her famous, but because he didn't understand how someone so talented could be so humble. Evelyn Moore was a mystery he had to solve. He asked his assistant to dig deeper. "I want to know her whole story," he said. The assistant called back a few days later. "Sir, it wasn't easy to find, but I got something. It's personal." "Go on," Langford said, leaning forward. "She used to be a star featured in music magazines, hailed as the next great pianist. People said she played with the emotion of someone twice her age. Her parents were supportive but not rich. She came from a simple background, no fame-hungry family, just talent and love." Langford listened silently as the assistant continued. "But then, when she was 21, something happened. There was a fire. Her family's old house burned down in the middle of the night. Parents and her little sister didn't survive. Evelyn was away at a concert when it happened." Langford felt a chill run through his body. "She lost her whole family," he whispered. "Yes, sir. The reports say it was a faulty gas heater. It failed while they were asleep." There was a pause. Then the assistant added, "After that, she vanished. She stopped playing in public. No interviews. No recordings. It's like she disappeared from the world." Langford's throat felt dry. He thought about that night at the concert hall again. The way she had played. So much pain, but also strength. Now it made sense. She hadn't just played music. She had told her life story without saying a word. He turned off the call and sat in silence. For the first time, he understood why Evelyn dressed simply, why she didn't chase fame, and why she didn't care what rich people like him thought. Her life had been torn apart, and music was her way of surviving it. But there was more. Langford asked his assistant to look into her present life. "How does she live now? What does she do?" "She lives in a rented apartment. Small, clean, nothing fancy. She teaches at the public school, gives private piano lessons in the evenings, and spends weekends volunteering at a community center. She's raising a child, too." "A child?" "Yes, sir. Her niece. The daughter of her sister who died in the fire. Evelyn adopted her. She's about 12 now." Langford was stunned. This woman had gone through so much, losing her family, giving up fame, and raising a child on her own, all while working simple jobs and still playing music with more passion than anyone he had ever heard. "She's never asked for help?" Langford asked. "Never. She works hard, keeps to herself, and stays out of the spotlight." Langford didn't know what to say. He thought about the way she had walked into that concert hall in a faded dress and worn shoes, carrying only a music folder. People like him had laughed. He had laughed. But now he understood her outfit wasn't a lack of style. It was a sign of what she had sacrificed. Suddenly he felt small. He made a decision. "I want to help her," he said. "How, sir?" "I don't know yet. But not with just money. She deserves more than that. She deserves something real." Over the next few weeks, Langford began doing things he had never done before. He visited schools, donated quietly, helped fund music programs, and even arranged scholarships for students who reminded him of Evelyn. All of it anonymously. He tried sending a brand new piano to Evelyn's apartment with a note that said 4. "The only person who ever silenced me," but the piano was sent back, along with a short note, "Thank you. But the children need it more than I do." She had redirected the piano to her school. Langford smiled sadly. She wasn't easy to impress. That only made him respect her more. Later, he tried offering her a contract through one of his music labels and offered to record an album, tour the world, and become the face of classical music once again. But she declined, politely and firmly. "Don't need fame," she wrote. "I just need to be useful." He couldn't believe it. In a world where everyone wanted to be seen, she was choosing to be invisible. The media, however, had started to take notice. Word about her performance at the gala had spread. Some reporters wrote articles about the mystery pianist in blue. A few tried to reach her, but she never responded. One evening, Langford drove past the concert hall where it all started. It was closed for the day, the lights off, the posters faded. A for sale sign hung near the door. He parked his car and just stared at it. That place had been full of laughter, music, and wealth, yet all anyone remembered from that night was a quiet woman in a simple dress. Evelyn had changed the meaning of that building. He had another idea.
Or one that scared him.
Not because it was risky, but because it was personal. The next day, Langford visited the building's owner. The man explained that the hall was losing money, and they were planning to sell it soon. Langford made an offer on the spot 3 times the asking price. Under one condition, the hall had to be renamed. That evening, Langford called Evelyn. For the first time, she agreed to meet him for tea. They sat in a small cafe near her neighborhood. She wore the same calm expression she always had. "You didn't have to buy me tea," she said softly. Langford chuckled. "It's the least I can do after what you've taught me." There was a pause. He looked her in the eyes. "I bought the concert hall." She raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because I wanted to give it back to you. I never owned it." He said, "But your music does." Evelyn didn't reply right away. She sipped her tea and thought. "I'm not interested in owning things," she said. "I know. That's why I'm putting it in your name anyway." She looked surprised. "You're donating it?" Langford nodded. "It'll be yours fully. You can run it as you wish, teach, perform, or let others perform. No pressure, no spotlight. Just music." For the first time, Evelyn looked unsure. "Why are you doing this?" Langford looked down at his cup. "Because you showed me that life isn't measured in money. It's measured in meaning. And your music gave meaning back to a room full of people who forgot how to feel." Evelyn sat back. She didn't smile. But she didn't refuse. "Accept," she said. "But only if it becomes a place for young musicians. Those who don't have a voice yet." Langford extended his hand. "Deal." And just like that, the concert hall changed forever. The paperwork was done quickly. The building was repaired and renamed the Evelyn Moore Center for Music and Soul. The grand opening was scheduled for the following month. But Evelyn didn't put up posters or call reporters. She sent quiet invitations to schools, music teachers, and small-town performers. She told her students they could play on the big stage. She invited kids who played in subways, old people who played at weddings, and anyone with heart. Langford watched all of this silently. He didn't ask for credit. He just attended the first rehearsal, sat in the same seat from that night. Watching Evelyn tune the piano while children ran around, excited to perform, he smiled. This wasn't charity. It was transformation. The woman he once mocked had taken his arrogance, broken it into silence, and turned that silence into something beautiful, and the music was just beginning. It had been a few weeks since the Grand Concert Hall was renamed the Evelyn Moore Center for Music and Soul. People in the city started to talk about it. It was no longer just a place where rich people came to drink champagne and clap politely. It was becoming something different, a place full of life, hope, and second chances. The hall didn't open with a celebrity concert or a red carpet event. Instead, it opened quietly, with small performances by children, street musicians, and hidden talents who had never been on a big stage before. Evelyn stood near the stage, guiding every young player like a gentle coach. She smiled when they hit the right notes and nodded softly when they made mistakes, reminding them that music wasn't about perfection, it was about feeling. Mr. Langford came to many of these small shows, always sitting in the same row, dressed a little more simply than before. The man who once judged people by their clothes now sat quietly, soaking in the music like a student. He never took the microphone. He never told people he bought the place. Just watched Evelyn work her quiet magic. But still, something inside him wanted to do more. It started changing slowly. Deeply on Evelyn was the reason. He had grown up in a world where everything was bought, where people only respected money, and where feelings were seen as weakness. But Evelyn had shown him another kind of power, the kind that didn't need gold watches or fancy suits. One day, Langford called his assistant into his office. "I want to make her an offer," he said. The assistant looked confused. "But sir, you already gave her the hall." "I know," Langford said. "But she still refuses everything. She's turning this place into something great, but she's still struggling herself. She still teaches part-time, raises her niece alone, and gives every bit of her energy to others. I want to do something bigger, something she can't refuse." Assistant hesitated. "She's not the kind who accepts gifts easily." Langford nodded. "I know. That's why it won't be a gift. It'll be an offer she earns." He spent the next few days planning, then he went to visit Evelyn. She was sitting in her office at the music center, surrounded by sheet music and student forms. "I hope I'm not disturbing," Langford said gently. Evelyn looked up and gave a small smile. "You're always welcome here. I came to talk," he said, taking a seat. "Not about the center, about you." She raised an eyebrow. "What about me? I've watched you. I've seen what you've built here. You're giving everything you have to these children, to this place. But you give nothing to yourself." "I don't need anything," she replied. "That's the problem," Langford said. "You think you don't?" She folded her hands. "I'm not trying to be noble. I just want peace. I want to offer you something that brings more. Peace, not less." She stayed quiet. "I want you to take a full year off from teaching, sabbatical. I'll pay your salary, cover your bills, and make sure your niece is supported. In that year, you can travel, rest, or do what you've put off for years. Record your music, right? Even just breathe." Evelyn looked surprised. "Why?" "The world deserves to hear more from you," he said softly. "And you deserve to give yourself the same care you give everyone else." She leaned back in her chair. "And what if I say no?" Langford smiled. "Then I'll respect that. But I'll keep offering in different ways until you say yes." She laughed a little. "You're more persistent than I expected." "Had a good teacher," he replied, nodding toward her. She looked down at the floor, thinking, "I appreciate the offer," she said. "But I can't walk away. Not now. The children rely on me. This center is still new." "I thought you'd say that," Langford said.
Oh.
"So I found a solution. I'm hiring 2 assistant instructors, people you trained yourself. They'll take over for a year. You can still check in, but they'll keep things running. This place is strong now because of you. It can stand on its own." Evelyn looked up at him. He saw the tiredness in her eyes, years of carrying pain, responsibility, and quiet burdens. He also saw something else, longing. A small part of her wanted to say yes. She just didn't know how to let go. Finally, she spoke. "I'll think about it." That was enough for Langford. A week later, she called him. "I've decided," she said. "I'll take the year." Not because I want rest, but because I want to finish something I started long ago." "What's that?" he asked. "My mother's music." Langford was confused. "Your mother?" "She used to write little melodies. She wasn't a professional, but she loved music. After the fire, I found a box of her notes and finished songs, short ideas, sketches. I've never had the strength to look at them properly, but now I do. I want to complete them, not for fame, but just for her." Langford didn't say a word. He knew this wasn't about money or success. This was about healing. Evelyn began her sabbatical in spring. She traveled to the countryside with her niece and rented a small cabin with a piano. Every morning, she played softly, testing old melodies, rewriting, reimagining. Her niece helped by organizing the music. Drawing pictures of what the songs made her feel, they called the project Songs My Mother Started. Langford kept his distance, sending only occasional updates about the center, which was thriving. The new teachers were doing well, and the children continued to grow under their guidance. Still, the students missed Evelyn, and every week they sent her letters, some with drawings, others with notes saying how they were practicing harder than ever so they could make her proud. Evelyn kept those letters in a box beside the piano. Meanwhile, Langford found himself changing more and more. He started mentoring young business people, choosing kindness over competition. He donated quietly to schools, arts programs, and even supported small family-owned businesses. But one day he received a call from Evelyn. "I've finished," she said, "the music." He asked, "All of it? Do you want to perform it?" "No," she said. "I want the students to play it. Each song is simple enough. I want it to be a concert, not about me, about them, about legacy." Langford smiled. "We'll make it happen." So they set a date, 1 year to the day after the center first opened. It would be called the Mother's Melody Concert. Every student learned a piece. Evelyn returned not as a star, but as a guide. She helped each child understand the feeling behind the notes: joy, sadness, love, memory. The concert night arrived. The hall was packed with parents, neighbors, teachers, and even strangers who had heard whispers of something special. The stage was decorated with candles and flowers, and in the middle sat the grand piano Evelyn had once used that night. She silenced the rich crowd. One by one, students performed. Some were nervous, some confident, but all played with heart. The melodies were simple, warm, and beautiful. Each one told a quiet story, a mother's lullaby, a song of hope, a memory of sunlight in a kitchen. Langford sat in his usual seat, just watching every note with pride. Finally, Evelyn stepped on stage. She said only one thing: "These songs began in my mother's heart. Tonight they end in yours." Then she sat beside her niece and played the final piece, a duet. As the last notes faded, the audience stood in silence, then burst into the loudest applause the center had ever heard. But Evelyn didn't bow. She stood, took her niece's hand, and quietly left the stage, just as she had done before, outside, under the stars. Langford caught up with her. "You did it?" he said. "No," she replied. "We did," he smiled. "What now?" "I go back to teaching," she said. "And you keep listening." He nodded. That night, neither of them said much more, but both knew something important had happened, just in the music, but in themselves. One had learned how to give without pride. The other had learned how to receive without guilt. And together, they had created something that would outlive them both. The morning after the Mother's Melody concert, sunlight gently streamed through the tall glass windows of the Evelyn Moore Center for Music and Soul. The hall, which had echoed with applause just the night before, was now quiet. The stage was still decorated with soft white flowers and music sheets, but there was a peaceful stillness in the air. It felt like something sacred had happened there. Evelyn arrived early, as she always did. She walked to the piano, ran her fingers across the smooth wooden surface, and smiled. Her niece followed her, holding a notebook filled with drawings and melodies they had worked on together over the past year. There was something different in Evelyn's eyes now. They didn't carry the same sadness from before. They held peace, 4. The first time in many years, Evelyn felt whole again. That day, the students came in excited, chattering about the concert. Parents came to thank her, some with tears in their eyes. "You've changed my child's life," one mother said. "My son never believed in himself until he played on that stage." Evelyn responded with her usual quiet humility. I already had the music inside them. I just gave them a place to let it out." As the weeks passed, the music center became more than just a building. It became a community. Street performers, retired musicians, children with no access to music, classes, and even shy adults who had once given up on their dreams came through the doors. Some came to learn, others came to heal. Evelyn made space for all of them. The waiting list to join the center grew long, but Evelyn never turned anyone away. "Even if we don't have a piano for you, we'll find a way," she would say. "Even if it's just your voice, that's enough." She expanded the program, slowly adding songwriting classes, music therapy for disabled children, workshops for teens who had dropped out of school. Each program had one rule: there would be no auditions, no tests, no judgment. Everyone would be welcomed with open arms and an open heart. Langford visited often, always quietly. He didn't sit in the front row anymore. He would take a seat near the back, watching Evelyn move through the halls like a gentle wind, never rushing, always calm. He watched as she hugged students, encouraged tired parents, and tuned old pianos without ever asking for thanks. One afternoon, Langford pulled Evelyn aside. "You've built something extraordinary here," he said. She smiled. "I didn't build it alone. I want to expand," he said. "Open more centers like this. In other cities? With your vision?" Evelyn thought for a moment, then replied, "Only if they stay true to the spirit, no competition. No pressure, just love for music." Langford nodded. "Exactly that." And so, with her help, the Evelyn Moore model was shared. New centers were opened first in nearby towns, then across the country. Each one followed the same heart-based structure: open doors, free lessons, emotional healing through sound. Former students became teachers. Retired artists came out of hiding. Music returned to places where it had long been forgotten. But while others called her a founder, Evelyn refused titles. "I'm just a servant of the song," she often said. The media started to notice. Newspapers wrote about her, calling her the piano angel, the soul behind the sound, and the woman who turned silence into song. But Evelyn avoided interviews. She refused television spots. She believed that the music should speak louder than her voice. One day, a famous music critic visited the center. He had heard about the place and wanted to meet Evelyn. But instead of finding a proud director in a private office, he found her on the floor helping a young child reach the pedals on a broken piano. "You're Evelyn Moore?" the critic asked, surprised. She looked up with a gentle laugh. "Sometimes, yes. You've inspired millions. People want to know more about you." Evelyn wiped her hands and stood. "There's nothing more to know. I just listen to people. And then I teach them how to listen to themselves." The critic walked away speechless. One evening, after a long day of teaching, Evelyn sat alone in the concert hall. The lights were dim, the chairs were empty, but she wasn't sad. She just needed a moment to breathe. Langford arrived quietly and sat next to her. "This place is full of stories," he said. Evelyn nodded. "And music is the only language that can tell them properly." Langford looked at her. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you had taken a different path?" She thought about the concerts she never played, the awards she never won, the world tours she never joined. Then she smiled. "I'd still be playing, but I wouldn't be living."
Oh.
There was a long silence. Then Langford whispered, "You've changed my life, Evelyn." She didn't answer. She just reached out and gently squeezed his hand. That year, something unexpected happened. A young boy from the center uploaded a video of himself playing one of Evelyn's mother's songs. The video went viral. Suddenly, people all over the world were asking, "Who wrote this piece?" When they learned it came from Evelyn Moore, the internet exploded. Hashtags with her name began trending. Musicians began playing her mother's songs in concerts, schools, and even subway stations. But still, Evelyn stayed quiet. She didn't chase the fame. Instead, she quietly released a small book of sheet music called The Songs My Mother Started, with all profits going to music programs in poor schools. Within weeks, the book sold out. One day, a well-known recording label came to her with a huge offer. "We want you to record a full album. Your story, your music hit, could inspire millions." Evelyn smiled. "I already have an audience," she said, looking at the children running around the center, "and they inspire me." The label offered millions, but she refused gently. "I play to give, not to sell." That answer made headlines. Soon, wealthy donors began funding her mission not just because of the music, but because of her message. She reminded the world that the most beautiful things come from the quietest places, that greatness doesn't need a spotlight, that the real stars are not always the ones on stage, but the ones who give others a chance to shine. Years passed, and the Evelyn Moore Centers spread across the globe. In each one, the rules stayed the same. There were no auditions, no uniforms, no expectations, just people and music. Evelyn continued teaching, though she slowed down with age. Her niece grew up and became a music therapist, helping children with trauma find their voice through melody, she said. "My aunt gave me music, but more than that, she gave me a heart that listens." On Evelyn's 60th birthday, the students held a surprise celebration. They played a song she had never heard before, a piece they wrote together, based on her style, her spirit, her story. They called it "Hands That Heal." As the final note played, Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. She stood slowly and walked to the stage, placing her hand on the piano, just like she did years ago. She turned to the children and whispered, This is what music is for." Outside, the sky turned golden. The city that once ignored a woman in a faded blue dress now knew her name. But more than that, they knew her purpose. Evelyn Moore had started with pain and loss. She had been mocked by a billionaire, judged by strangers, and ignored by a world that valued appearance over soul. But she answered all of it with music, that healed, music that lifted, and music that never asked for anything in return. She didn't just buy a concert hall, she bought back dignity. She gave it to the broken, the forgotten, and the lost. And in doing so, she taught the world the most powerful truth of all. Sometimes the quietest voice holds the loudest truth, and sometimes the person we laugh at is the one who teaches us how to listen, forever and always. Evelyn Moore remained the woman who let her piano speak, and the world never stopped listening.